So going back really, I say going forward really. So where do you think paganism is today in this country? Because we've got a very different platform of paganism in this country. You said about 1995, you were disillusioned with certain aspects of where I hate the word paganism because it obviously the spirituality comes into that, lots of different aspects around that. So how do you think that is, say, 1995 or even earlier, and then say compared to say today? How is paganism in today's society, modern Britain?
I think what's like with every aspect of life, what happened was the internet. And
do you think Doreen would have loved the internet? Because obviously I know from what I've read from her works is that she literally wrote to everyone. She called people up and she got first-hand accounts of everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So with the internet, it'd have been like, wow.
John, Doreen, I have to say, was far more modern in her outlook than I am. She was. You know, she was. And I'm not. She asked me once how I felt about gay hand fastings, and I said, well, something I'd never really thought about. So she said, well, what are you doing Saturday? You know, and she was ready to do gay hand fastings, perfectly normal as far as she could see. Now, me too. I have no problem with that. I just hadn't thought about it, but she had. She always was thinking ahead. One of the I don't know, you know, this whole internet thing, it's too instant. You know, as I said, it took me 4 years to become initiated, and that was because I hadn't measured up to what this particular covenant expected of me, and until I'd measured up, they wouldn't let me in. So, you know, you ask questions for 1 year and a day, and then they will either extend that, or within that 1 year and a day they'll tell you that you're not right for the craft. Now I'd never seen, I had seen because it was on the shelf, but through my training I was never involved in a ritual. I never saw the inside of a book of shadows. And all that I was allowed to do was turn up once a month and ask questions. And it was the questions that we asked that determined your suitability. So, you know, if I turned up, if this gathering of new people turned up, you were expected to ask a question. And if someone asked a question about, you know, how does herbs fit into witchcraft, then they could answer that to the best of their ability, but without betraying any rules of the craft. So they could say, you know, yes, we do use herbs, and we use herbs for health reasons and for doing this and doing that. But if you suddenly turn around and said, and I've actually been then as an elder in a situation where somebody said, when do I get my first virgin? You know then.
Someone really asked that.
Yeah, seriously. And somebody also seriously said, what does baby's blood taste like? But if you look at the two questions, it's about suitability as to whether they're right for a spiritual path that you're involved with. Now, it may well be that you ask the right questions, but you may not be suitable for that particular coven. Now, my first coven was a traditional Welsh coven, and my second coven was coven because I left and I went to live in the United States, and when I came back, I didn't go back to the West Midlands, which is where I lived. I then moved to the South Coast, and then had to go through another year and a day with another coven, because that was the law. It was always a year and a day at least. And that particular coven were very theatrical. Now that suited me because I was a rock and roll musician and grew up in a theatrical family. So that's absolutely suited me. But you had a situation where you may have somebody that's right for the craft, but wrong for the coven. So the responsibility of the coven leaders was to find the right coven for that particular person. Now the problem is that Oh, and then once you're initiated, that's the first time that I ever saw the inside of a Book of Shadows, and I was allowed to copy it up to second degree, but never allowed to even look at the pages of second degree and above. Now it's all over the internet. It's all over. It's all over the internet.
So do you think that it's like
So it's lost. It's lost a lot of its magic.
So yes, the magic really is in the learning process.
Yeah.
It's taking the time to understand, to learn why is this the case, how is this the case, and then the value of learning that knowledge in the process of it taking a year and a day. I mean that clearly is the intention of it, and now it is freely available to all. Does that mean more people instantly a third degree, or do you think that actually negatively affects someone's learning ability?
God, I was involved with a whole Australian thing once. I was due to go to Australia to do some talks, and it was a particularly hot summer where out of the 5 big events that I was supposed to go to, that 3 of them burned down. It was everything got set on fire. Probably nothing to do with me, I hope. But then it was just instant. I mean, there were people saying, well, why do you want to go through all of this? Or why put yourself through that? I call myself anything I like. But the magic is never passed on. The craft is never passed on. It can only be passed on from one person to another. So it doesn't matter how much time you spend on the internet, you're never going to learn the craft.
No.
So you can call yourself what you like.
Only those from, through personal experience can teach someone
Yeah.
secrets, as it were.
Yeah. There's a wonderful expression that the Freemasons have, but I use it all the time. I remember a friend that I met who was a Freemason. We were just talking in general about Freemasonry and the crafts and the similarities and things. And he had this wonderful expression that everybody thinks it's a secret society, and he said it's not a secret society. It's a society with secrets.
That's the way I view it too.
And I think that's the way that we should see the craft, because it is. You see, there are lots of natural powers, and with the right teacher, you can learn to tap into them. Now, the easiest one that everybody can understand is static electricity. And there is a way of storing static electricity within your body to use it.
Okay.
And there is a big theory about Bruce Lee that he was actually killed by his masters who came along to see him. They didn't like him working on these movies, and they wanted him to go back to
His magic craft, to his martial arts craft.
And just before they left, the 2 masters, one of them touched him, and he jumped. And then a few hours later he died. Had a massive heart attack and died. And one of the theories, which I think has a lot of credence, is the fact that the stored static electricity was passed on through him and gave him a massive shock. Now, if you are taught to do that properly, it's very useful, so everybody can understand the static electricity, but there are lots of others. But you can't put that on the internet. I once went with some other members, we had a phone call to somebody that had been doing astral travel.
Okay.
Bought a book, opened the pages, and I also think for somebody with no inner magical experience, inner magical abilities, that for 90% of the people it doesn't matter, because they're never going to do anything anyway. How much they tried, it's not within them. And I'm not knocking them, just that's the way it is. But then you've got that other small percentage of people where it's natural. And unless you teach that person properly, they're going to get themselves in trouble. So we had a young guy who had bought a book on astral travel, was obviously had a natural ability, had read the book and tried some out-of-body experiences and couldn't get back. So we had a phone call. This I say young guy because I'm getting older, but he was in his early 20s, and he just couldn't get back in his body. He'd been out for several days, and just didn't. He'd read page 1, 2, and 3,
did step 1, 2, and 3, and then didn't read step 4.
But didn't read step 4 and had to get back. So there was this poor guy that was...
I'm curious that way, because that's really what I've done for the last 15 years, is I've investigated curious and anomalous phenomena. That's what I've done with ASAP and various other organisations. So very curious to that story. How did you bring him back?
By talking about it. By explaining pages 4, 5 and 6.
Okay, so and obviously through his...
just put it back.
By hearing, obviously there was... He obviously
put it back. Yeah. He knew where he was, we just couldn't get back in it. So that, you know, there's an example of natural ability, and this is why this is, you know, part of the reason why I started in 1995 the Centre for Pagan Studies, because people were teaching people to do, or it was available for people to go there, and the people that were teaching them were exactly the people that shouldn't be teaching anybody, because
they haven't done it themselves.
they were collecting the money and teaching people to do things, but it was those people, the people that with the natural ability that were getting themselves in trouble, and I objected to that greatly. If you dabble in it, you're in trouble. So for me, what's really different, it's what's happened with the internet, and what can we do about it? Well, we can't go back. We can't go back. It's impossible to take it away. It's impossible to take it away.
Because I'm curious, because I guess more people have become aware of witchcraft, like say pagan pride, sort of pagan stuff, and all these different aspects, because they have the instant communication of the internet.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, when I first started, I guess that's quite that's an interesting story as to how I actually found out that was what I was looking for. I was in a rock and roll band. That's what I did. That was my living, and I was about 16 when it first started. I suddenly felt a stirring in my loins. There was something spiritual that was definitely happening with me, definitely happening. So I assumed that I'd found God. So I started to go to church. Nothing wrong with Christianity, I think it's a very good religion. But for me, it didn't press the buttons. There was something missing. I couldn't put my hand on what it was, put a finger on it. I just knew it was not right. I used to get to the stage where during the church service there would always be a part where the priest would stand up and he would say, "Forgive us, Lord, because we're all sinners." And I'd probably tried to sin that week, but you know, there wasn't any of the girls that were going to let me in, so to speak. But so I found that presumption offensive, and for me it became a barrier. So I think we're talking, 42 years ago, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and people had shot off to India, and they were all experiencing the Far East and religions, and I thought, well, that's what I need to do. I'm going to go and experience the Eastern religions. Unfortunately, I didn't have the money to get out to India, but I did live in Birmingham, so all the temples in Smethwick got a visit from me. So I became very interested in Eastern religions, but again, something was wrong. Buddhism almost got me, but there was just something that was missing, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And the one night in the band, we were playing at Keele University, and like always, after the end of the gig, you stay behind and have a drink with the faculty or the student union bar or wherever it was. And I suddenly heard in my ear there was somebody said, "Oh, go and talk to John. He's the God botherer." So I looked around and what do you mean? And they were talking to, I don't know, he was the head of the religious department, but he suddenly came over and said, "Oh, I understand you're a spiritual person." I said, well, don't make too big a thing of it. And I said, "But I'm not quite sure where my spirituality lies." He said, "Well, tell me about it." So he said, "Well, when do you feel that you're most spiritual?" Well, I said, "Well, it's never in a building. I can appreciate these wonderful buildings, but it's never in a building. In fact, I kind of I kind of feel more in touch with things when I'm halfway up a mountain with him, with the wind trying to blow me off, or walking along the beach with my feet in the tide. Just that's it. He said, so are you? And I said also the other thing I quite like is being. He said, "Oh, it's scary. I quite like being in the woods at night. I find that really peaceful."
Very much.
And he said, "Oh, right." He said, "So have you never put any of those things together?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean." He said, "Well, obviously yours is more of an earthbound spirituality rather than a higher spirituality." So I said, "Well, I guess it is really." And he said, "You're nothing but an old witch." And I said, "Look, no, look, I'm being serious." And he said, "So am I." I said, "No. I mean, thanks, but thinking that, those wonderful old hags with the green faces and the warts and stuff, who'd want to become one of those?" But and of course thinking they didn't exist. But there was something about the word, and I don't know what it was, but there was something about the word that struck a chord. Maybe it was the fact that I was in quite a heavy rock band, and the word witch might be a bit scary. I don't know, but there was something about the word. So then I went to the library and couldn't find a book.
Was already written at the time, I guess not.
That was Malus Manufactum and stuff, but there was very little you could find, very little, especially in the library. But it took me a while before I even found a coven. It wasn't in Wales, it was actually in Canada, where they lived. But all of a sudden, when I found these people that said, there's this and there's that and the other, I found my home. And what I found was that the thing that didn't work with Christianity or any of the other Eastern religions was it wasn't of my land. And the one thing that I found about any of the pagan religions is it relates to your land. And that for me was the connecting point, and has been for the last 40 odd years.